Bonjour! Let's revise for your French writing exam.
Here are the dates for your November mocks. The writing is the first exam that you will do this time and it is worth 25% of your overall grade. However, don't forget that the phrases you revise for the writing exam can be reused for your speaking.
The great thing about the writing exam is there are no tricks. The examiner wants to see that you can use opinions, past tenses because you're higher, future tenses, and a variety of aim high phrases. If you've been revising with your checklist, if you've been looking at the checklist that's on Arbor or the writing section on Vocab Slam, you will be absolutely fine. As we can see from the grade boundaries, these ones are quite harsh, they're from 2019. You needed to get at least 36 out of 60 for a grade 7. So have 36 as your minimum, but try to aim as close as possible to getting 60 marks. As you already know, you definitely need knowledge to be successful in an exam. However, sometimes thinking strategically about what the exam involves can gain you extra marks. So let's look at top tips for the writing exam. My strategy would include choosing the essay that you know the most vocabulary for, and of course my favourite phrase, don't show what you don't know. So for example, if you're not very strong at environment and you get a choice between environment and school, go for the school essay. The examiner doesn't know that that's the reason why you chose that one, but if that allows you to really show off your French, that's going to result in a better mark. We've already been doing this for a while, but in the night before the exam and the morning before the exam, after you've done your English, focus on memorising phrases at home and writing a checklist at the top of your exam paper. If you go straight into the exam and write down all of the phrases that you really like and you know are correct, then you will have that piece of paper with you through the whole test, and it will be a little bit like having an equation sheet that you can refer back to for answers. If I were to sit the higher paper tomorrow, I would start with question 2 because it's worth the most marks, 28 marks. And as we've seen in the previous examiners' reports, they do tend to be quite stingy with those marks. So you really want to be very fresh. You want to be putting all of your best, most show-offy phrases into question 2 to try and get as high a mark as you can. The translation is always going to be challenging. I suggest that you look at it and instead of thinking, oh, how do I say we, how do I say go, break it down into grammar points. What is the examiner actually testing? If you get a sentence that says, by doing my homework, you know that they're testing to see whether you know the on ANT structure. Or if you get an after having done sentence, you know that they're testing to see if you know après avoir and a past participle. The really tricky one is when they give you a have been sentence. For example, I have been studying French for 10 years. Remember, have been studying is just another version of the present tense in English, so you would just translate it with present tense in French. A key rule is look at the translation, think about the grammar that they're testing, and if you feel confused as though you've never learnt that piece of grammar, it's probably a trick. So think of another way that you could say that same sentence, and probably you know how to say that in French. Always leave room for checking at the end of your essays, and look in particular for common mistakes like verb endings, or whether you've accidentally used je suis instead of j'ai for the past tense. Make sure that you've used opinions past and future. As a higher candidate, I'm pretty sure that you'll be geared up to do that tomorrow. However, just double check at the end of your essays that you haven't accidentally forgotten to use tenses. And don't be afraid to use the basics as well. You know, if the past tense that you know really well is j'ai mangé, j'ai regardé, throw them in, because then if you confuse something later on, you'll still get marks for using past tense. The worst thing you can do is walk away from the exam not showing that you know your tenses, even if they're basic. And my final tip would be to use your speaking. It's not going to be the same person that marks the writing and the speaking. So you can use what you learned for your speaking in your writing if you still remember it. So personally, I would complete the exam in the following order. I would spend the most amount of time on question 2 because that's a 28 marker. And really what it boils down to is the examiners are looking for creative and complex writing. In order to tick those boxes, you just need to use the high-level phrases that you've been learning all these years in French. For example, pour que je puisse, j'ai besoin de. These are what they mean by complex because they've got complex grammar within the phrases. When it says creative, it's about writing in a lively and engaging way. So for example, if it was an article, you would start with Salut mes lecteurs, hi my readers. Or if you're writing to a friend, maybe you just include ça va at the beginning to make it seem like a letter. So creative and complex writing. I would then complete question 1, which is the 80 to 90 word question. This is the exact same question as the foundation get. Normally higher pupils are able to get, pretty much full marks on this question. So this one you don't need to be as, as creative. You don't need to use as challenging grammar. You need to save that for question 2. With the translation, I would leave it till last. However, it might be worth, in between doing question 2 and question 1, it might be worth spending some time just looking at the translation and having a think about the grammar that they're testing you on. Is there a past tense? Is there something that looks more complicated? Is there a simple future tense? So you might want to have a look at the translation first and work out the grammar and then come back to it at the end and complete it properly. This gives you some time to dwell on it a bit as well. At the end of your essays, make sure that you've used opinions, past tenses and future tenses. That's really, really important. On question 2 and question 1, you need to use all of the tenses. Always check as well common mistakes such as adjective endings. So when you're describing something, if you were describing something plural, you need to add an S. And word order. So remember in class we talked about the bags words. These are the words that go before a noun. For example, if you were saying a big house, because it's to do with size, you would say une grande maison. But if you were saying a blue house, it would just say une maison bleue. So just check that you've put your adjectives in the right place and that you've used the right endings. Also just have a look at your verb endings. If you're not sure, think about a different way that you could write your sentence. So instead of starting your sentence with my friends and I went to the beach, it's a lot easier if you just say I went to the beach with my friends. And if you can do that accurately, it will get you a higher mark than if you try to do something very complicated and get it wrong. I've said it before, but really the best preparation you can be doing at home now is learning a checklist of phrases in French that will definitely score you high marks. You can see 2 examples here from previous pupils. So the first one that's writing about the job in Paris. This is somebody who's very, very confident with grammar, and the way they've written their checklist is using grammar codes. I wouldn't advise this for everybody. This is for the type of student that grammar is their specialist subject, so they know what they're doing, they know what it looks like, they know how to include it. It's perfectly fine to do what the other student has done here, who's writing about the environment, and actually write out the phrases that you want to include. If you think this will limit your chance of making mistakes, then you should go for that option. I also like that that student has written next to each of the bullet points whether they're going to use opinions, past or future to answer the question. I will go through some phrases. Remember, you can pause this video at any time and write down your favourite ones or the ones that are most memorable. Or you can skip this section of the video because you might already have a checklist in mind. If you're wanting to revise some phrases that I think would be good to put on the checklist, you can go to the writing practice section on Vocab Slam. And you can see there are phrases to do with writing an article, writing to friends, and grade 9 grammar. When you go on it, they look like translation activities. It's not the best format because even if you miss a capital letter or a comma, it might tell you that it's wrong, but at least you can go on it and practice some common phrases that would be good to include in your writing test. As previously mentioned, the best preparation you can do at home is learn a checklist of phrases in French, the ones that you know are going to score you high marks. Now, some of these must come from the basics anyway, because part of passing the test is showing that you can give opinions past and future. However, I've gathered here some more interesting opinions so that you're not just writing the same thing as everyone else or the same basics that we've been learning since year 7. So please pause the video here and write down any of these phrases that you particularly like, and you can learn them to add to your checklist. To make your writing more interesting, you can add little words like intensifiers, qualifiers, and frequency adverbs when you're giving opinions. Again, you can pause here and write down any of the ones that you particularly like. So, here are some common intensifiers, things like très or vraiment. These just make your writing a little bit more exciting. So instead of just saying it was good, you could say it was really good, it was quite good. Just makes things a bit more interesting for the examiner to read. You've got fillers and qualifiers like absolument, un peu, avec un peu de chance. Again, don't try to learn ones that you find really complicated. Just learn your favourite ones and make sure you use them in the test. And we've got frequency adverbs, such as d'habitude, de temps en temps. I know a lot of you like that one. Parfois, quelquefois. When it comes to negatives, they always need to wrap around a verb, and it needs to be the first verb that you're using. So again, don't show what you don't know. If you don't feel confident with negatives, don't write them. Or look them up on BBC Bitesize tonight and learn how to use them, or learn one that you feel really confident about using. The examiners like it when your essay flows nicely and it reads like an exciting piece of writing and a logical piece of writing. So you can achieve this by linking your sentences together well, probably like you do in your English exam. So here are some phrases that help you link and tell a story properly. For example, like firstly this happened, furthermore, on the one hand, on the other hand, overall, when all's said and done, at the end of the day. These are nice little phrases that make your writing sound more polished.
In order to develop the opinion bullet points, don't forget about that really catchy song, the YMCA. We start with mentioning yourself, so give your opinion, then mention somebody else. For example, mais mon ami or ma mère m'a dit que, give somebody else's ideas. Then contrast, cependant, elle est folle, for example, and then add extra information, aussi. You could add an example of something you've done or give anything extra that you can. Have a look at the example below.
And remember, there are lots of phrases that you can add to make your vocabulary more interesting. These green phrases are aim high phrases that you will have learned in class. You can add them at the start of an opinion sentence. For example, selon moi, according to me, cafes are really great. It just makes your opinion sound more interesting. These purple phrases are intensifiers. Words like very or quite or so or really or a little bit. Instead of just saying it's great, you could say it's really great, and this will get you higher marks. The phrases in red are more interesting words than just, for example, bon or fantastique. You want to try to use phrases that other students won't use, like sans ça, génial, formidable, or chouette. That one's quite old-fashioned, but it's very perfectly fine to use in your exam. Here are some negative ones. Nul, Barbon, morne. Morne is one that not a lot of pupils will know. It means gloomy. Of course, you will need to be using past and future tense in your writing. In the foundation exam, it's essential that you use past and future for question 3. Remember, question 1, one important thing, opinion. Question 2, two important things, opinion and future. Question 3, three important things, past, opinion and future. So I'd just like to remind you of some of the past tense phrases that you've seen in class. All of these ones I'm pretty confident that you'll know. Even just using something like j'ai bu is really good on the foundation paper because it looks easy, but it's actually an irregular verb. Always give your opinion with c'était, because then if you make a mistake with the past tense, it still counts that you used past tense because you put c'était, it was. Now, do you remember my top tip from the speaking exam? It was to give a statement, for example, j'ai visité, give your opinion, and then use après avoir. So after having visited the Eiffel Tower or whatever you said you visited, and then you'd give another past tense. So for example, I could say, j'ai mangé une sandwich. C'était délicieuse. Après avoir mangé une sandwich, j'ai visité les monuments. Now suddenly I've got a full paragraph about what I did, and I've used the high-level phrase after having eaten, after having visited, after having drank. That will look really good in your writing. For the future tense, we've got phrases such as je voudrais. Je voudrais, it's actually conditional tense, but I know that a lot of you know it really well, and it will give you marks for future. So je voudrais with aller or manger, you can use je vais, il sera, it will be, on ira, we will go. Or you could try to use something a bit more complicated. For example, if I were rich, I would like, and then you could say to go, to visit. If I were rich, I would like to buy. That's a more high-level phrase. Il serait, it would be. So again, you can pause here and make sure that you know some of these phrases off by heart. And then when you get into the exam, you write them at the top of your page like a checklist, and you make sure you use them, especially in question 3. And remember question 2, the important things, there's 2 important things, opinion and future. So you make sure that you know some future for question 2. By now you probably have some aim high phrases that you know really well. However, if you would like to memorize some more in the last few hours before your exam, I've just gathered some here that I think are really nice and ones that we've used in class before. So you can have a look at these and try to learn some extra ones. My advice would be only use them if you're confident using them. Don't try to force them into a sentence because you might mess up the grammar a little bit. It's as I always say, don't show what you don't know. The translation is always going to be challenging. Even if you 100% know the vocabulary, you need to look out for the exact structures that the examiners are trying to get you to use. Here is an extract from the examiner's report from last year's paper. This is what they wrote about the translation. As you can see, they're really looking for communication. So here they mention, which meant that they still managed to communicate the passage rather than omitting parts. So what they're looking for you to do here is reword the question if you're not quite sure how to say exactly what they've asked you to say. So in this one, some pupils that didn't really know how to say it's my ambition to do something, they tried to put like I dream of doing, or my dream is to do this. So sometimes if you're really stuck with the translation, you can think what would be another way to express this idea and how could I write that in French? For example, with this translation, so this one was from last year, straight away I can see that I have an adjective, my favourite sport. So I know that the examiner is testing me to see whether I have learnt that adjectives normally go after. Do you know, like stylo vert? It's not vert stylo. So I think here they're trying to see if I know that. In the second sentence, suddenly we're talking about a third person, my best friend. So they're looking to see whether I know my verb endings. He or she, we just add E. In the next sentence, straight away, they're giving me a past tense. Last month, I won. So I might know that gagner means to win or to earn, but do I know how to put it into the past tense? In the sentence after that, we've got another issue here with the word better. Do I know how to do this kind of word? Do I know how to structure that, where it needs to go in French? And then we've also, on the final line, we've got by practicing. So the examiners are testing to see whether you know that higher level structure, which is actually more of an A-level structure. So in that sentence, we've got a bit of grammar that's probably aimed at grade 9. We've also got here a modal verb, I can. The modal verbs tend to come up a lot in translations, and I'll put a slide of them in a moment so you can revise them. So if you want to try this translation now by yourself, please pause the video because I'm about to show you the mark scheme. If you just want to have a look at the mark scheme and compare it, you can do that too. So here is the mark scheme. So as we can see, they're looking to see whether you put favourite after sport. My sport favourite is the tennis. Again, look, talking about he or she, we just add E, so they're going to check that. When we've got the past tense, we need to start with j'ai unless it's Mrs. Van der Tramp, and we need to end with E with an accent, so they're testing to see whether you know that structure. When it comes to the bit about being a better player, they've got être, to be, un meilleur joueur. So this is one of those words that goes before, and it's not like préféré, it goes before, look, un meilleur joueur. They're also testing to see whether you put the right ending. So they've got the option for you to have the masculine version, or they've also included the feminine version. So you're allowed to choose whichever one you like, just make sure that the grammar lines up properly. And here at the end, we've got that structure, en pratiquant, so A-N-T with E-N, and the modal verb, je peux, I can. So they're really testing lots of different things here, lots of different bits of grammar. So if you did this with me as your own translation, you can pause and you can mark it and see which bits you got wrong. We'll do a few more of these because I know that some of you are a bit more concerned about the translation. However, remember at the end of the day, it's worth 12 marks. It's much more important that you really go for question 2 and question 1, because altogether those 2 questions are going to give you 48 marks out of 60. Here is another previous translation that has come up in an exam. So again, I always start by looking through this. What is the examiner actually testing? So here they're looking at relative clauses. Do you know, like qui s'appelle, which I study, who is called? They're looking at that kind of structure. This is something they love to do. They love to try to trick you into separating a person and a verb. Remember, in French, you won't see je souvent vais, je souvent mange. So you've just got to take that word. Imagine it's not even there. Take it out to one side and do the I go bit first. And then you can put that word back in either at the beginning of the sentence or after I go. But don't split up the person and the verb in French. So they're looking at that there to see how you do that. They've used another relative clause style structure here. But if you know the word for where, you know, if you think about where you can, I live in a town where you can, you should be able to work that out. Oh, here we go with a past tense. So as soon as I see last year, I'm thinking about what verb I'm going to have. So we've got the verb went. We've got to be really careful because it's my family and I went. Okay, so it's a group of people. We've got to make sure that we conjugate the verb properly when we do that one. What else? The experience of going abroad and learning about the culture of the country is interesting. So perhaps they're looking to see what you will do with going and learning, because ing words, it's not a really common structure in French. So maybe they're looking to see what you will do with that. So again, you can pause the video here and you can try this for yourself, because I am about to reveal the answers to you, but it would be good to for you to think this through by yourself first. So looking at the mark scheme, here we've gone for que j'étudie à l'école. So this again is something, it's a little bit more A-level grammar. If you've got a person in the sentence that's coming up next, so which I study at school, you use que. If you haven't got a person, then you use qui. So when you're describing someone, my mum, who is called, then that's qui, because it doesn't say who she is called, it just says who is called. So that's where we use qui, Q-U-I. If we've got a person coming up, look, which I study, then it changes to que. But it's just a little thing, it's a little bit tricky there, but I think that's what they're looking for. As we mentioned before, we're not going to split up je vais, we're going to keep it together, and then we're going to put often, we can put it after it, or we can put it at the start of the sentence. Here we needed to make sure that we did the past tense properly. So normally it's je suis allé. So for a group of people, nous sommes allés. And they're being really tough here. Look, they've put one where you have to add an S. Remember, Mrs. Van der Tramp verbs like aller, you're allowed to add extra letters to them in the past tense, but you're not allowed to do that normally. So if you were saying we ate, nous avons mangé, you can't start putting extra letters on that. You can only do it for Mrs. Van der Tramp verbs. And here, where it's the experience of going abroad and learning, they just simply want you to use infinitives. L'expérience d'aller, infinitive, so going to go abroad and to discover the culture is interesting. We didn't notice it when we read it for grammar, but because culture is feminine, la culture, look, they've put an E on intéressant. So it'll be little things like that that they'll pick up on to see how good your knowledge of grammar is. Here's another one about school. So before I start unpicking this, you might want to pause and then have a look for yourself and see what grammar you notice. Straight away I'm seeing to have, so I'm thinking about infinitives there. I've also got third person, my brother, and I've got had to, another modal verb. Okay, so again, they're very common in the translations, and I'll put a slide of them in a moment just so you can see different forms and how they come up. So my brother had to repeat a year. That's a very set expression that we've learned before, the phrase to repeat a year. That's something special, isn't it, that they do a lot in Europe and that we don't really do. So I think they're looking for your knowledge of that. Oh, this is difficult, look, it's a negative. He never used to do his homework. So think about what tense that would be. He never used to do it. I have chosen to study science. So again, it looks like an infinitive structure here. I have chosen to study science next year to help me with my career plans, to help me. That's going to be a little bit difficult because we know that in French, when we're saying something like, he gave me the present to help me, it's often the opposite way around to what we expect. And here we've got something that is a plural in English, but will it be plural in French? We've got to think about that. And we've got one of those strange structures, so by, working hard. We've had one of those in another translation, so it seems like they're quite popular. And then we've got a tense, I will be able to. Be able to, a modal verb again. So there's a lot going on in this one. The vocabulary seems easier, but the grammar seems more challenging. You've got really a lot of things that you need to think about when you're completing this translation. So you can pause the video here, because next I'm just going to go through the answers. You can have a go at this and then see what you come out with. So looking at the mark scheme, we've just got avoir here. It's important d'avoir, so to have. So il est important de, that's a set expression. It's important to have. Une, because words ending in shon are normally feminine. Une bonne éducation, especially in France today. My brother had to. So the past tense version of devoir, a dû. He had to. Now, they haven't actually gone for what I suggested here with redoubler, but I think redoubler would be a more sophisticated answer because it is what it's actually referred to. I think the examiners have been nice here, look, and put quite a literal answer, because maybe a lot of pupils didn't know the phrase redoubler. We've got the negative here, so ne, jamais, with one verb in the middle. Il ne something jamais. So make sure when you're using negatives, you're putting them around the first verb that you're using. And because it's used to do, look, it's imperfect past. Il ne faisait, AIT. He didn't used to do his homework. Oh, we missed a past tense here. Look, j'ai choisi, I chose to study, but that was an infinitive. And then this bit to help me is pour, in order, me, to help. Pour m'aider, in order me to help. Okay, so whenever you've got that kind of structure where it's to help me, to help you, you've got to put the person before the verb. Pour m'aider. And then the by working hard, it's what we thought it would be. Look, it's on, and then A-N-T. This one's difficult, look. Je pourrais, I will be able to. So it's got AI at the end because it's the future tense, but it's a modal verb. Je pourrais réussir à mes examens. Here's a translation from the past, which has a lot of the grammar that we've already spoken about. If you would like to work out that grammar, you can pause now and have a look at it for yourself. However, I'm going to talk you through it. This one has the classic present tense problem. So we've got my family has lived in our village for years. Now it sounds like past tense because it's got ed. However, this is one of the 4 English present tenses because they're still living there now. Yes, they have lived there for years, but they are still located in that village. So when we translate it into French, we can use present tense. We also have the phrase many tourists come to visit. So we need to be really careful there to put a plural ending on our verb. We have a negative, we don't like this. I think that will cause people some problems, like how to translate this, and getting the negative in the right place. We'd like, remember that's a shortening of we would like, so that's conditional tense. Anything that has we would in it, then it's going to be the conditional. So we would like to move, infinitive there, to a quieter area. That's going to be a little bit tricky, isn't it? Because it's like saying to a more quiet area. Here I think they've put in an ing word just to see how you react to it, but it shouldn't be too difficult if you think it through. Normally, unless it's got by or while at the front, we can normally just use an infinitive for that. We've got another negative, so they really wanted to check here that you understood how negatives worked. We've got this strange phrase, which doesn't come up that often, but it's very difficult, and I think this was aiming at a grade 9. So have just discovered. And then at the end, you've got they might buy. So this is one where you could use a modal verb because might is it's like could, isn't it? They could buy this. We've also got another relative clause. So remember what I said in the previous one about using a relative clause. For example, qui s'appelle. So this one was quite tricky. There's a lot going on in this one. So you can pause the video now and try to translate it, or you can just watch me go through the mark scheme with you. So here is the mark scheme. As previously mentioned, it was actually very easy to translate has lived because you just wanted the present tense. Now, you might have thought, oh, family, that's a group of people. And yes, it might be a group of people, but the word family is singular, my family. So here you don't need to put the they ending, you just need to put the E on it, like he or she. Afterwards, we've got the tourists come to visit. So you can see that's quite an unusual verb. So I think it would have caused some pupils some issues there, and that's why they've used it. Also here, we didn't really mention, but it's a very beautiful place. Beautiful is one of those words that goes before what it's describing. The word endroit, the word place, comes up a surprising amount in these translations. So revise that one as well, endroit. Later on, let's have a look. So we'd like to move to a quieter area. As predicted, look, they've used the conditional there. Nous voudrions. Déménager, maybe it's a word that you wouldn't know, so maybe they're testing, to see if you know how to reword that. They've used endroit again, so they really care about you knowing that word in this one. We've got the negative here, look. Nous n'aimons pas celle-là. We don't like this. So they're testing to see if you knew how to translate this, and they're also looking to see whether you'll put the negative in the right place. A quieter area. In French, you can normally get away with putting plus, and then the adjective, plus tranquille, more calm. As I suggested, they've translated the finding, so the ing word, they've gone for an infinitive, trouver, une autre maison. N'est pas facile, is not. So you just got your negatives around one verb there. But my parents, now this is a really weird one. So here, look, it says have just. Now they've used again, look, the same verb that's up here that they use when they're saying tourists come to visit. Because it's like in English when you say my parents came across a great place that they want to buy. So if you want to say they've just done something, use venir. Vient de découvrir. They've just discovered an old castle in France, which they might buy. So again, you've got que, which, and pourrait, modal verb, which they could buy, which they might buy. So you can see there's a lot going on in the translations. It's really more of a grammar test to see whether you can recognize when they're using the future or whether they're using the past. Some of them are trickier than others. So hopefully the one you get will be nicer, but do what you can with it. Try to unpack the grammar and have a good go at it. But at the end of the day, really focus on question 2 and question 1. That's where all the marks are coming from. In previous translations, modal verbs have come up quite a lot. This is nothing to worry about. You know these verbs. However, you probably don't know that they're called modal. So these are verbs like pouvoir, to be able to. So if you're saying I can, I am able to, it's je peux with an X. And if you're saying he can or she can, il peut with a T. Okay? When you're using this verb and you have a verb after it, so for example, I am able to visit. Visit is just an infinitive. Je peux visiter. Il peut visiter. In the past tense, it looks like this. I was able to. And in the future tense or conditional tenses, it changes to pour with 2 R's. Je pourrais. So this one says I will be able to. If I added an S to the end, it would say I would be able to. We've also got devoir. Now you might know the word devoir as a noun. It means homework. But the reason they call it homework in French is because it's something you have to do. So devoir also means to have to. It's je dois, I must, or il doit. Again, if you're talking about he or she, you add a T. In the past tense, j'ai dû, I had to. Don't forget the little hat on the U. And in the future tense, or the conditional tense, it changes into devra. So just like how pouvoir has a r, je pourrais, Je devrais, I ought to. It's like I should do this thing. And then we've got vouloir, to want to. Je veux, so that one's a little bit like pouvoir. Je peux with an X, je veux with an X. Il veut, again, when it's a third person, it's always got a T. I want. J'ai voulu, I wanted to. And you'll definitely recognize this one. Je voudrais. So this is where voudrais comes from. And look, again, it's got an R in it when it goes into the future or conditional, just like devrait and pourrait. So if you've got some time tonight, it might be worth looking over these and learning these different versions. It just seems as though the examiners like to put them into the translation to see what you do with them, how you react to them. So that's it for the writing exam. Remember, there are no tricks. They need to see that you can use opinions, past, future, and aim high phrases. And as a higher candidate, the more range that you can show in your vocabulary and in your grammar, the higher the mark you will get, especially for question 2. If we have a look at previous grade boundaries, we can see that you had to get 36 out of 60 for a grade 7. That was in 2019. Hopefully yours will be a little bit nicer, but who knows? So try your best to really show off in question 2. That's how you're going to get the top marks. If you want to carry on revising tonight, you can go back through this video, you can practice the translations, you can make a checklist, you can go on Vocab Slam and practice the different categories on there. The most important thing that you can do is have a checklist of key phrases and make sure you get a lot of rest, because tomorrow you've got 2 exams on one day, so you really need to be rested up. If you've got any questions or you want me to mark anything, of course you can email me. Alors, bonne chance et au revoir.